Hello, hello, hi everybody. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Every Which Way podcast. How have you guys been doing? Anything new going on? Did you have a good couple of weeks there? Mm. I have some honey bush red tea that I'm drinking today. The last of my stores from the Sacred Moon Circle Apothecary. So before I get into like life updates and stuff, I made the executive decision that whenever I have to work overtime or if I have to cover a weekend shift and at work, there will be no episode posted for that week. But I will let you guys know on Facebook. I posted it, my decision and stuff there. I post it on Patreon, and I'll post it other places as well. But that's because I'm the only person working on this podcast, which it's not too much, and I enjoy it. But whenever I have to work more, it's hard to do the research, record, the little bit of editing that I do, and all that stuff. It can be a lot, along with all the other stuff that I do in the house. I do have 3 cats. I have a partner. So yeah, that's the decision I've made. But again, I will let you know via Facebook, on the Patreon, social media, when those happen. This is not a permanent thing. This is just for now. I want to get to a point where I have episodes recorded and then a backlog for situations like that. And I plan on doing that. I need to get better at that stuff. But other than that, I'm doing well. This past Tuesday, on the 14th, I think it was. Let's see here. Let me check the calendar. This past Tuesday, the 14th, I went and got some scalp cysts removed, 3 of them. One on the top of my head, one in back, close to the nape of my neck, and one by my ear. So that's a thing. And they don't hurt so much. They're just a little bit uncomfortable whenever I wear headphones like these, like the ones I'm wearing now, and stuff. So there's that. But they came back not cancerous, so that's good. That's really good. But yeah, that's kind of really the only big major update that I've really had. Yesterday, my partner and I went out on a date night. We went to see The Wolfman in theaters, which was surprisingly pretty decent. I enjoyed it. And then we went to dinner, and that was nice. So yeah. How have you guys been? I would genuinely love to know. Please let me know how you guys are doing. And all of that jazz. And I'm feeling better. I'm not nearly as sick. I've just got some congestion, which I think is normal. And that's about it. But all of that, I'm doing well. And I hope that you guys are doing well too. I really do. But enough about me. So today I'm talking about something that I've had an interest in for a while now. And it's something that I think a lot of people, at least here in America, may not know a lot about. I certainly didn't until a couple of years ago. But I'm talking about the Great Noise, which was a period of time between the years 1668 and 1676 that a lot of witch trials took place in Sweden. And before I dive into it, for those of you, my European listeners, those of you who are from Sweden or Denmark or any of the Scandinavian countries, I apologize for any of my awful pronunciations. I am sorry. And I'm also sorry if I get some timeline stuff mixed up. This topic is very vast, and I did the best that I could with doing most of my research from articles and papers that were by Scandinavian people, but it was a little touch and go there. So I just want to apologize up front. I don't mean any offense. I hope you guys aren't offended, but I did do my best. And also I apologize to Sabaton. I love that band. So don't hate on me for getting anything wrong. I tried my best. So let's crack in. The Great Noise. Det stora oväsendet. The Great Noise. And again, this was in Sweden, that took place between the years 1668 and 1676. Before we get into the meat of that time, I wanted to do a little bit of explanation of how life kind of was. So early precepts of Christianity didn't lump general magical arts and destructive magic together. They were their own two separate entities, and the act of using magic or doing sorcery in and of itself wasn't what was illegal, but the destruction that resulted from the outcome of magical workings was. So if you did a spell that prospered the community, that was fine. But if you did a magical working that caused cattle to die, then that was considered not good. Even if the devil was invoked, so long as the outcome didn't destroy anything, it was fine. And it kind of stayed that way until around the 11th century, when it was widely accepted that the devil was the source of all magic, and that whoever practiced or worked magic or did sorcery, as it was often referred to, they had made a pact with the devil. So such dealings and bargains were viewed by the clergy as severe enough as to threaten God's omnipotent position and the power of the church. Okay. So sorcery was outlawed in Sweden with the country law of Magnus Eriksson in 1350, who was the king at that time, with the punishment of death if it had been combined with murder. Thus far, no evidence has surfaced to confirm that anyone had been executed for sorcery in Sweden during the Middle Ages. This law was repealed or reworked in 1608 when a more modern Witchcraft Act was enacted. All right. So I hope you guys are with me. I know this is a lot of history, but it's to build a timeline, but also a historical outline as to the context of this issue or this event. During the 15th century, so we're talking like 1400s if I'm correct on that, a plethora of manuals on witches, how to find them, how to try them in a court proceeding, and how to execute them were published, with the Malleus Maleficarum, or the Hammer of Witches, or the Witch Hammer, being one of them. And the Malleus Maleficarum was written by Henrik Kramer and Jacob Sprenger and published in 1487. This manual asserts that women are most likely to be witches due to their feeble minds and lecherous bodies. So, right from the get-go, it was women who were the primary targets, you could say. The Protestant Reformation of the 1500s also played a part in things. Because it brought about a religious movement that saw different sects of the church separating from the Catholic Church. In the midst of such mayhem, Swedish witch trials intensified. Swedish Catholic Archbishop Olaus Magnus Gothus demonized pagan and Lutheran beliefs, the latter of which had been slowly encompassing Sweden. And he did this primarily through his 1555 work, History of the Northern Peoples. While the work doesn't correlate directly to the witch trials, it did include the precise location of what was called the Blockula, which is the place where Nordic witches assembled for their sabbats, where they met with the devil and had sexual relations with him. The witch in the 17th century, so 1600s here, was a mixture of old traditions and how evil female magic workers were viewed by the Christian church. They resembled Lilith from the Jewish myth, in that they were seen as lecherous and treacherous creatures who dwelled in forests and would come in the night to eat children and to ride a person in their sleep. Not like sexually riding, but to like use them like a horse or a donkey, like a mount, to physically ride to places. Okay? And the beliefs, these are beliefs that carried over from early Roman Christianity and the Reformation, helped to flame the hysteria surrounding witches, and the targets were primarily those who practice herbalism. Why is that? Well, that's because only the church and health professionals were thought to be able to cure diseases and ailments. It would be going against the church's power and authority, and the kings, in regards to the Lutheran Church, for cunning folk to cure the illnesses and diseases with herbs. So in a way, we're kind of seeing a pattern of not wanting the church and figures of power, not just like the Christian God, but also prominent monarchy or noble figures afraid of losing power. Old folklore, superstitions, and beliefs often clashed with the new religion of Christianity. And the Little Ice Age, which spanned from the beginning of the 14th century all the way through to the mid-19th century, made it difficult for crops and livestock to really thrive. Coupled with plague outbreaks and rising taxes that kept many in poverty, it was a perfect storm of chaos and desperation. And the reason why I'm bringing these things up is because this is the world that these people were living in. The common folk were struggling, and they were living in a world that was not only metaphorically dark, with the different religions and with Christianity starting to really like dig its clutches deep, but with literal darkness. This was a dark world, literally. not just with the lack of light, but with the climate being as it is, causing a lot of crops and livestock to die. And again, this was a time when the Black Plague and a lot of other diseases were severely hitting humanity in the asshole. This was a hard time. So is it any wonder that people looked to those that they considered other to blame? Had to take a sip of tea there. So that is kind of, and that's just not central to Sweden, that was across Europe as a whole. But narrowing it down to focus solely on Sweden, the first known witch trial occurred in 1471 with Brigida and Karen Andersdotter, who were both accused of witchcraft. Erik Clausen was executed in 1492 for consorting with Odin, who was viewed as a demon by the Christian Church, though it's important to note that his trial was a heresy one. And I'm just listing examples of issues before 1600, okay? To make a timeline of that these things, events, cases, accusations did pop up, but they weren't an everyday occurrence, okay? I hope you're with me there. From 1527 to 1596, during the time of the Swedish Reformation, approximately 100 witch trials took place, mainly in Småland and Götaland. Of these trials, it's believed that only 10 total executions happened. In this time frame, specifically in 1550, Lasses Brigida, I'm so sorry, became the first woman confirmed to have been executed for witchcraft. 21 years later, in 1571, priests were given orders to watch out for signs of witchcraft in their communities, which led to any individual who engaged in witchcraft to be excluded from the congregation. And finally, in 1575, 2 women were executed in Fryksdalen. Between 1607 and 1610, there were a few additional cases where torture occurred, which were submitted to King Charles IX. While on his visitation journey throughout Sweden in 1596-97, Bishop Abraham Angermanus sought to root out whatever didn't align with Protestant practices, resulting in about 140 witch trials, mainly in Götaland. These trials, thankfully, only resulted in fines, whippings, pillorying, and other punishments, but not death. 3 women from Hälsingland were accused of, quote, flying over mountains and valleys to the Blockula in 1597 to engage with intercourse with Satan. During this time frame, one accused was a woman known as Britta Pipare, or Britta, wife of Joran, the flute player, who was charged with sorcery in Stockholm in September of 1596, alongside a cunning woman from Norsund named Margareta. Britta, it was claimed, had caused sickness and economic damage to some of the city merchants via magical workings. Though she denied working with the devil, she did confirm to using potions and spells, and as this trial occurred in 1593, the law didn't take working with the devil really into account. However, Because Britta confessed to practicing magic, she was imprisoned until September of 1595. After being released, she was banished from the city and subsequently disappears from the historical records after that, as she isn't mentioned anywhere following her release, at least nowhere that I could find. Excuse me. I am closing my little incense coffin case. I have some incense going. Another prominent witch trial case in Stockholm was that of a woman known as Geski, or Horgeski, who was believed was a prostitute, with the whore, well, meaning whore. She was accused of using magic to strip people of courage and power, and of blackmailing a widow and her son to give her money, a piece of gold, and a golden ring, though she reportedly still harassed them after the fact. Geski pleaded not guilty to all charges against her. However, a witness named Karen, of course it's a Karen, gave testimony during her trial. Now, Karen herself admitted to being a witch who had slept with Satan, along with Geski and another woman called Britta. And I'm not sure if it's the Britta mentioned above. I don't think so. There are a lot of names that are similar, as you're going to come to find out. So I apologize if that's not accurate, but I try my best, guys. Anyway, back to Karen. She testified that she'd seen both women participate in Satan's Sabbath at Blakula, and that Geski had the mark of Satan in her nose. The testimony of Karen continued to grow until a total of 6 women were implicated, all of whom used bones and other animal and human parts to create magical tools and objects that were used to harm neighbors. Eventually, this trial became huge, but the court was apprehensive of Karen's statements due to her, admission of being a witch, and the case ended up being dismissed. The last mention of Geski states that she was in prison, and as the recording of this episode of the podcast, it's unknown whether she or Britta faced further prosecution. As a Protestant reformer, King Charles IX favored more strict sentences regarding sorcery, and in 1607, he condemned a woman to be burned after she'd been accused of sucking all of the blood and power of her son through a magician. A more modern Witchcraft Act replaced the old one in 1608 that introduced the death penalty for all forms of sorcery based on the Bible passage from Exodus, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." In 1611, one woman was forced to undergo the water test. And for those of you who don't know, the water test, which is also known as the swimming test, is where the accused is tied up or bound and thrown into a body of water. If they sank, they were considered innocent and absolved of all of their crimes. If they floated, they were found guilty. It was believed at the time that witches who made pacts with the devil weren't baptized, and the water would reject them. And this is also the year when the trial of Ellen E. Horsnas took place. Now, who the hell is Ellen E. Horsnas? Well, she was a widow who resided in Småland. Many in her community thought her to be a witch for quite a long time, and was accused, Ellen was, of sorcery for the first time around 1599, 1601, somewhere around that time frame. She was subjected to the water test along with 2 other women who unfortunately drowned. But unlike the other women, Ellen passed and was acquitted. And it was believed that she bribed the executioner of the water test with sexual favors in order to survive. Which, I mean, I can't really blame her. If I was going to be drowned, I would try to do anything I could to not be. Because that's just a horrible way to die. Suspicion of her didn't cease after the water test, though, and Ellen eventually went to trial in Sunnerbo in 1611 after being accused of using love magic, as well as the murder of her first husband and a neighbor, making cattle ill, and several other things. The list the court had received was quite extensive, apparently, and having gotten fed up with receiving so many complaints or issues, they decided to put her on trial. Ellen, of course, denied all charges and defended herself instead of having her husband do it. A witch hunter reported to having seen the devil's mark under her right breast, despite her being fully clothed at the time. And this was later confirmed after being examined by women. Ellen was, again, forced to take the water test, but this time she failed. Following this test, her head was shaved and she was tortured. And while she never admitted to being a witch, she did confess that she had poisoned her first husband with arsenic. She was sentenced to death on September 18th of 1611 via beheading, though the exact date and method of execution wasn't documented, and if it was, they have not been found as far as I was able to look. So, documentation of witch trials during the 1610s is few and far between. Records weren't always kept in immaculate condition. But 7 women were executed in 1617 in Finspång, in the Finspång witch trial, and 2 witches were imprisoned in Gävle in 1619 for having sex with the devil in Blackula. Suffice it to say, the first wave of these witch trials in Sweden occurred between the 1590s and 1610s before stopping or pausing during the 1620s. For 40 years, give or take, it was a rarity for the death sentence to be issued for witchcraft. During Queen Christina's reign, witch trials didn't really happen. Only a few outliers are really noted in the records. One being the case of Olaf Manson in 1648, whose sentence was commuted to a disciplinary punishment instead of the death penalty. The Queen ordered a witch trial in the Swedish province of Bremen-Verden to stop in 1649 to avoid it becoming a massive trial. 2 women from Umeå were executed following their confessions of having traveled to Blackula and using magic to milk cows. And in 1653, a woman from Lit in Jämtland was sentenced to death after using magic to kill cattle. This is, allegedly, the last execution for witchcraft in Sweden before 1668. Prior to 1668, a little under 100 executions were carried out for witchcraft in Sweden. And now we focus on the Great Noise and that time period in particular. So the Great Noise was focused primarily in Sweden, in northern Sweden, and the former Danish province of Bohuslän, and began in Alvdalen with a young boy accusing a shepherd girl named Gertrude Svensdotter of walking on water while herding goats. Pastor Lars Elvius was in charge of her trial, and Gertrude claimed that Marit Johnsdotter, a neighbor's maid, had abducted her to a sabbat at Blakula when she was 8 years old in 1663. 7 others were also singled out by Gertrude, and the trial was in full swing by September of 1668. On May 19th, 1669, 6 women and 1 man were executed via decapitation and then burned in a great bonfire for witchcraft. Their remains were burned, I should say. From Ovdalen, the panic spread to a nearby town named Mora in March of 1669. In total, 60 people were accused of witchcraft between 14 to 17, depending on the source, were executed following these trials in Mora. An important note for the trials in Mora is that the children accusers or witnesses were punished for their participation in the Sabbath at Blakula and for mingling with Satan. Approximately 148 children were whipped or forced to run the gauntlet, which is a punishment where the guilty party runs between two rows of soldiers who attack them with sticks. Well, rumors spread quickly via word of mouth from village to village, parish to parish, about witches kidnapping children to sabbats at Blakula, where they were subjected to sexual abuse and coerced to sell their souls. Parents of children demanded that investigations take place to look into these stories. It's from this flame that a fire of hysteria grew, threatening to sunder local society and the central power of government. In response to this, the government assembles a special commission, the Witchcraft Commission, of lawyers and priests to help local churches and courts with these trials. The new commission traveled to the most worst off, witch-infested locales with the task of, quote, freeing the nation from the fury of Satan. The witch hysteria only grew, though, and the trials quickly became a national catastrophe. To save Sweden from God's eternal condemnation, as well as to protect the children, think of the children! Many villages and courts cast aside the typical accepted procedures. Torture was implemented, having been deemed necessary to obtain confessions, and children were used as key witnesses. They previously had been labeled as untrustworthy sources beforehand. Some people were even paid off by priests to testify, and many executions were carried out based off the tales of children alone. Keep in mind, this is all during a time where it was during a little ice age. There was disease and pestilence. Crops and cattle were dying. It was a hard time for everyone. So another village, this one called Lillhardal, which was neighboring to Alvdalen, had trials that went on for years, ending in 30 people being executed for witchcraft. They were all accused of kidnapping children and taking them to the sabbats at Blakula, as well as having sexual relations with the devil. Anyone sentenced to death in these trials were decapitated and their remains burned in a bonfire or at a stake. Let's see here. I have to look through my notes. I have to look at my notes. That does not belong here. Sorry, guys. Just give me a moment. All right. Oh my, give me more than a moment. All right, sorry. And we're back. Found the spot in my notes. So, the worst of these trials occurred in Torsaker, in the province of Angermanland, in 1674. Assistant Parish Minister Laurentius Christophery Horneus, who was formerly Lars Christofferson, had been tasked to seek out all of the witches in Torsaker by Minister Johannes Watrangius, both of whom considered themselves chosen to fight the devil / evil. Okay. These two men were thoroughly convinced that a great battle between good and evil was taking place, and that witches were tools of Satan whose souls could only be saved via confession, specifically confession through torture. Witches weren't the only ones subjected to torture, as witnesses were often tortured in order to get more, quote, suitable, end quote, testimonies out of them. The water test was a common method used by authorities to identify witches. And if an individual was found to be a witch, they were decapitated and their bodies burned. There was only one case where the witch was burned alive, and that was Malin Matsdottir during the Katarina witch trials, which I will get to here shortly, but let's continue on with the Trosker trials. So, the district court started these trials in Tossaker on October 15th or 19th, depending on the source, in 1674. In total, 71 people were executed, 65 women, 2 men, and 4 boys. Some sources say that 9 of the accused were executed on March 28th, and the rest were executed on June 1st, but I mainly saw June 1st being the date where they were all executed. It was only when the accused received their last Holy Communion did they realize that they were going to be executed. Let that sink in. It was only during receiving their Holy Communion that they realized that they were about to die. And after receiving communion, they were marched to the scaffolds on the mountain that's now referred to as Haxberget, Witch Mountain, or Balberget, Fire or Bonfire Mountain. Hold on, guys. My phone is buzzing. Hold on. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. My partner called me, so I had to pick up the phone. But alrighty. So, getting back to the Witch Mountain executions, all condemned witches, so all 71-ish people, were beheaded away from the stakes so that their blood didn't soak into the wood and prevent the fire from occurring. They were stripped of their clothing by their family members who were present and burned until the fire naturally went out. The youngest was 18 and the oldest was 70. There is a museum on the subject of this particular one, I think in Stockholm. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And people are able to go to the site of the burnings and walk the trail that the accused traversed, because they had to walk from the church to the mountain. So about 100 people were accused, but we're unsure how many were actually convicted and not executed. So, even during that time period, the trial's legitimacy was questioned. The special commission and the local courts were supposed to report to the higher court to confirm the sentences. Instead of that, the local court in Torsaker executed the accused witches without confirming with their superiors, thus making them unlawful. The commission was recalled from Torsaker to question for its transgressions, and this ended the trials there. So pretty much 70 people were executed unlawfully. So not great. Bit not great. But that wasn't the end of the witch trials as a whole. They continued in Katarina parish in Stockholm, which had 4 separate instances of cases. The first trial in Katarina parish saw 3 women, who are Anna Mansdotter, Britta Sippel, and Anna Sippel, who were executed on April 29th, 1676. They were decapitated and burned at the stake. The second trial was unique in that 2 of the executed confessed willingly, so without being tortured, to being witches. These 2 women were Margareta Matsdotter and Maria Jorensdotter, and they were thought to be suicidal. And through the child witnesses had, and though the child witnesses had conflicting testimonies at first, the 2 women were ultimately found guilty. Margareta accused her employer, Agnes Johansdotter, of being a witch, and Maria accused Karen Johansdotter, who was the wife of a blacksmith, and the latter, Karen, later committed suicide in prison. Both Margareta and Maria accused Anna Persdotter of being their accomplice in their witchery. While Anna denied their claims, she was sentenced to be burned alive, but was commuted to decapitation after she had been convinced to confess by Margareta Matsdotter and Maria Jorensdotter. Margareta, Maria, and Anna were executed on May 12, 1676. Katarina Witch Trial number 3 focused on Anna Simonsdotter Hack and a woman named Malin Matsdotter. Now, Malin Matsdotter was born in Österbotten, Finland, which was at the time a part of Sweden, in 1613. She moved to Stockholm in the 1630s to work as a maid, married Erik Nielsen in 1638, and had 2 daughters, Anna, who was born in 1655, and Maria, who was born in 1657. Her husband, Erik, was executed in 1668 after daughter Anna accused him of having sexual intercourse with a cow. Both Erik and Malin, mainly at Erik's behest, often beat their daughters. So, not the best people. Malin remarried in 1669. Both of her daughters left home not long after that due to constant fighting and quarrels between their mother and their stepfather. Malin is often referred to as Rumpare Malin, and while the actual meaning of Rumpare isn't well known or defined, it does share similarity with the term Rumpaxe, which means stupid or uneducated, or a stupid or uneducated person. Malin was accused of witchcraft by Maria, her youngest daughter, in July of 1676. In the records, Maria tells the authorities that her mother invited her to Blockula several times, even riding to it on a man. Upon being interrogated, Malin said she could hardly read, couldn't be bothered to do so even if she could, and barely knew the Lord's Prayer. When she did read prayers to the court, her language difficulties, which maybe like a speech impediment or something like that, caused her a lot of issues and trouble, which made the court immediately suspicious. Due to the Swedish Church Ordinance of 1571, all citizens were required to read so that they could read the Bible. So, Malin having trouble pronouncing words and reading from Holy Scriptures was a main reason for suspicion. Maria, her daughter, testified that the devil himself was standing beside her mother in the court, holding onto her skirt and whispering into her ear. The court ordered Malin to fall to her knees and pray to be able to confess, which she did, and Maria stated she couldn't see the devil anywhere there afterwards. Others spoke out against Malin as well. Matthias Wallendorf, who was 10, and Margareta Jornsdottir, 7, both said that they had been kidnapped by Malin to the Blockula. And Maria's claims, Matthias and Margareta Jornsdottir supported Malin's claims of seeing the devil in the courtroom. Gertrude Matsdottir testified that Malin had kidnapped her children 16 times to meet Satan before losing them in a game or something, game or challenge, to another witch by the name of Anna Simonsdottir Hack. Gertrude also accused Malin of kidnapping them another 14 times while incarcerated in prison. And her children even stated that Malin had beaten them to keep them quiet and from testifying. The court again demanded that Malin get on her knees and repeat a prayer read to her, which she attempted to do, but ultimately failed to do 11 times. So for 11 times, Malin failed to repeat a prayer that was read to her. Malin, having served as a midwife to a woman named Anna Zippel, who had been executed for witchcraft prior to this trial, didn't help her case either. Her difficulties at reading Holy Scripture, her lack of religious knowledge as a whole, and the testimonies of her daughters proved to the court that Malin was guilty. On July 16th, 1676, Malin was unanimously judged as guilty and sentenced to death. It was decided via majority rule that she was to be burned alive. On August 5th, 1676, Malin Matsdottir was mounted to a stake, her hands and feet chained in iron, a bag of gunpowder draped around her neck, and was burned alive. It's reported that she didn't scream, she didn't cry, and she refused to make peace with her daughter Maria, all the while maintaining her innocence. Anna Simonsdottir, on the other hand, was also executed, but she was beheaded before her corpse was burned. Following that was the fourth and final trial in the Katarina parish, which centered around Karen Ambjornsdottir, Margareta Matsdottir, who is also known as the Dove, and Margareta Remmer. Now, Margareta Remmer was different from Karen and the other Margareta, as she was the wife of a, for all intents and purposes, police captain. And as such, she was supported very strongly by her husband, and she was also a member of high society. She had been accused of kidnapping the children of a man named Peder, Peder, Gra, who actually had been charged with smuggling by Remmer's husband prior to her trial. But it wasn't just Margareta Remmer who had been accused, but also Maria Euphorsen, who was the king's aunt, and Countess Maria Sophia de la Gardie, both women who were noble and basically out of reach from the law. But it was these accusations that caused doubt to spread within the Witchcraft Commission in regards to the child witnesses. The court began to question these child witnesses and demanded them to repeat their testimonies instead of just verifying them, many of whom failed to do so. On September 11th, 1676, one of the children confessed to having lied, which resulted in several others also confessing to lying and committing perjury. This session caused the Katarina witch trials to dissolve completely, and everyone who had been held in prison were released and acquitted. With the witch trial over, authorities started prosecuting the witnesses for perjury, executing the main ringleaders among the children, while the ones who were bullied or coerced into playing along were whipped or sent to work at workhouses. The reports of the Witchcraft Commission say that these public punishments caused all the remaining child witnesses to stop talking about witches entirely. Which, good. By 1677, the government and the Witchcraft Commission ordered the clergy nationwide to commence a prayer of gratitude in their pulpits as a way to cease the spread of further witchcraft panic and hysteria. Anyone who spoke out against those orders were severely lectured and forced to comply anyway. After 1676, the Svea Court of Appeal seemed to stop death sentences for witchcraft, even though the Witchcraft Act of 1608 was still enacted. Occasional reports of witchcraft did pop up in the late 17th and early 18th centuries, but these resulted in lesser punishments or were flat out repealed by the higher courts. The last person to be executed for witchcraft in Sweden was Anna Eriksdotter, who was decapitated on June 15, 1704. The last witch trial to take place in Sweden occurred in Dalarna in 1757 and was stopped by the higher court. The death penalty for witchcraft was ultimately abolished in 1779. From 1550 to 1668, 100 people were executed for the crime of witchcraft. From 1668 to 1676, approximately 300 people were executed, most of them being women. There are probably more, but the records are lost. The numbers we do have come from records that have been preserved and kept in good condition over time. And that was the Great Noise. It's a heavy subject. Some of it seems kind of silly. Some of it, all of it is not, though. A lot of people pretty much lost their lives for nothing, in my opinion, at least. It's a period of time that was fueled by religious panic, by fear and doubt, not just of people, but of life. What with the little ice age, with crops and cattle dying, with disease running rampant, it was easy for people to believe themselves to be punished for sins and looking for anything and everything to justify such occurrences and to try to get on the good side of the Christian God or nature. And it's important to know about these things because they are part of our history. And it's important to be able to look back and see and learn from it. Because if we can't learn from it, then what even is the point, you know? At least that's my opinion on it. If you're not learning from the past, then you're doomed to repeat it, right? And it's easy to say that the people back then were dumb, uneducated, or lacking general knowledge. But that wasn't the case. Some of these people were fairly intelligent. And in all honesty, if someone were to look back on us nowadays, 300 years from now, they might think that we're stupid and uneducated, you know? It's a thing that shouldn't have happened. But it did. And I really don't have anything else to say. This was a heavy topic. It was great to learn about. And I hope that I did justice. And for those of you in Nordic countries, I hope that my pronunciations weren't too awful, that I got the history mostly correct and accurate. And if I didn't, I do apologize for that. But that's all I have for you this week. I hope that you all have a marvelously magical Monday, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye, my friends. Take care of yourselves. Make sure you drink plenty of water and practice self-care. Okay? takes a lot of medicine to make it through the winter time. So my mic died towards in halfway between halfway in through Malin's story. So on July 16th, 1767. Sorry. Let's start over.